What's up, everybody? Thanks as always for supporting the show. It would mean a lot to me if you would take a second to scroll down and hit that subscribe button to the Hoops Tonight YouTube channel, and then follow me on social media on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter so you guys don't miss any of our content over the course of this season. All right, let's talk some basketball. Let's move on to our season predictions. So we're going to do 5 biggest predictions this NBA season. Number 1, who will win the title this season? So as I've said in my power rankings, I'm picking the Nuggets over the Bucks, but I want to in the finals, but I want to kind of dive into that specific concept a little bit more because I do think any of the top 6 teams can win, and I don't think any of them has a significant advantage. I'd give the Nuggets about a 15% chance to win the title. I think they're going to repeat. I think they have the best chance out of all these teams, but chances are they're probably not going to repeat. There's a 85% chance, in my estimation, that someone else wins the title. And this is how I break it down. I'd give the Nuggets about a 15% chance. I'd give the Bucks, the Celtics, the Lakers, the Suns, and the Warriors each about a 13% chance. I saw this, I know a lot of people are down on the Warriors, but I saw this stat the other day that actually kind of even encouraged me even more that they're on this tier. It's from Tim Kawakami, who covers the Warriors for The Athletic. And he tweeted this out. He goes, Anthony Lamb played 5 more minutes than Wiggins did last year, and they still won 44 games. Now, your first instinct is to say 44 games isn't that much, but in the Western Conference, win totals are going to be weird because there's so many good teams. There could be a team in the West that's every bit as good. As a matter of fact, I think there's 3 teams in the West that are every bit as good as 60-win teams in years past, but they're just not going to get close to 60 wins just because the sheer amount of talent on a night-in, night-out basis and how difficult it is to win games. I think all 3 of those teams are going to finish in that 50 to 53 range for wins just because of how stacked the league is. So if the Warriors won 44 games with Anthony Lamb playing more minutes than Andrew Wiggins, and this year Andrew Wiggins is available more consistently and they just have better role players to go to, there's no reason at all why they can't win 48 games, right? And 48 games is going to get you a top, 4 or 5 seed and potentially have home court advantage in the first round. And so, again, this is the same starting lineup that won the championship 2 years ago, less than 2 years ago. So I don't think they should be written off entirely. I think they belong on the bottom of that tier, but they very clearly belong on that tier. I think a lot of people are writing off the Warriors this year because they had a bad season last year, but I think it really came down to some bad luck during the regular season and a really bad matchup with the Lakers. I genuinely believe Anthony Davis and his ability to shut down the Warriors' offense is a problem, and the Warriors are going to have to watch out for that. But at the same time, it's very possible that they could just end up not having to play the Lakers if the Lakers end up catching a different matchup early on and losing, because I don't think the Lakers are some juggernaut that's going to run through the league. I think they're only a little bit better, and matchups do play a huge role in these situations. If I say that the Bucks, Celtics, Lakers, Suns, and Warriors all have a 13% chance to win, who faces who is going to play a huge role there, right? It just could be a matchup thing. It could be that the Suns have the magic elixir to beat the Nuggets, but the Lakers match up too good with them on the other end, and then the Lakers beat the Suns, right? It could be that the Warriors have the magic elixir to beat the Nuggets, but then they run into the Suns and the Suns have their number, right? Matchups are going to play a huge role in this situation. Now, if we do the math here, if I say that the Nuggets have about a 15% chance to win and the other 5 teams each have about a 13% chance to win, that takes us up to 80%. So that remaining 20% I would put as the field. And the teams that I'd look at there are if the Clippers stay healthy by magic after 3 years of not doing so. The Miami Heat, if they make a trade at some point for someone like a James Harden or a Kyrie Irving or who knows who could come available and bring them the offensive firepower they need. You just can't ever write off Bam Adebayo, Jimmy Butler, and Eric Spoelstra. It'd be foolish to do so. The Sixers, if Joel Embiid goes up a level in the playoffs and they get smart return on a James Harden trade or convince him to stay. And then the Mavs, I know that I'd give them literally a 1% chance, but if they stay super healthy and they hit on a couple of these signings and that front court of Powell, Grant Williams, and Josh Green turns out to be a really good dirty work grouping, Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic are 2 of the best half-court shot creators in the NBA. And so I don't think they could be written off as a team that could get in as a play-in team who gets in or a 6 seed, 7 seed, and then they just beat teams in the playoffs by slowing the game down, out executing in the half court, and getting enough stops with guys like Grant Williams, Josh Green, and Dwight Powell, Maxi Kleber on the floor as defensive and rebounding options in the front court. Again, super, super small chance, but like there are certain things I think you have to have in order to win, and I don't think we can write off the Mavs completely with Kyrie and Luka as half court shot creators. So the point is, yeah, I think the Nuggets are the favorite. I think they deserve to be called the favorite. I legitimately think they have a better case to win the title than any other team. But it's very unlikely that they actually repeat, in my opinion. The NBA history tells us that we haven't had a repeat conference champion, forget about an NBA champion. We haven't had a repeat conference champion since KD and Steph were playing together on the Warriors. So this is not a bold take, but even though they're the Warriors, even though I think they're the favorite, I think it's very unlikely that they actually win the title again this year. Second biggest prediction. Who will win the MVP this year? So according to DraftKings right now, the odds are Jokic plus 450, Doncic plus 500, Giannis plus 550, Embiid plus 650, Tatum plus 800, Kevin Durant plus 1,400, Steph plus 1,500, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander plus 1,600, Devin Booker plus 1,800, Trae Young plus 1,800. Those are your top 10 MVP odds. But I'm kind of confused as to how these odds are being put together because we've learned some lessons over the last couple of years with how MVP works. And it's less about who's actually the most valuable player, and a lot more about these voting trends that we see, right? Win totals didn't seem to matter much to the voters the last 3 years, right? Last year we had a 3 seed win MVP. 2022 we had a 6 seed win MVP, and 2021 we had a 3 seed win MVP. So I don't think it's as simple as just who's the best player on the best team anymore. Before that it seemed to be, right? Because we had Giannis, Harden, then we had the weird Russ year, but then we had Steph. 2014 was KD, right? So that's 4 or 5 years, 4 out of 5 years that we had a 1 seed that won MVP. So it's not that it doesn't happen, and that's certainly something that can happen, but it's extremely unlikely recently. They've been targeting guys that have been doing more for lesser teams in the MVP race. Secondly, if you play alongside another star, you don't get to win. That's just how it works. So I don't understand Tatum's odds. There's so much talent on the Celtics. And again, Tatum's the weird one because it's not like he's playing alongside another superstar, but everyone thinks that the Celtics have the most talented roster in the league. With Drew Holiday, Jaylen Brown, Derek White, and Kristaps Porzingis flanking Jason Tatum, he's going to have to win 65 games and average 32, 10, and 7 on 62% true shooting for the league and the voters to give Tatum MVP. So I just think he's just about disqualified. Giannis and Dame playing together, that's probably going to get them both disqualified. That's just what NBA history tells us. Anthony Davis with LeBron. Unless LeBron has a significant decline, I don't know that AD can win MVP. But if LeBron averages 27, 7, and 7 again this year with his reputation, Anthony Davis is not going to get MVP, right? Kevin Durant with Devin Booker, especially with Bradley Beal in the picture. I don't think either of those guys can win MVP. Both of them are in the top 10 for odds. I don't think we're going to see that. Kawhi and Paul George, right? Those guys, NBA history has shown us, look back. We had Embiid. He's playing alongside a limited version of Harden and Tyrese Maxey, who's a non-star, right? The 2 Jokic years, Jamal Murray wasn't considered a star. Giannis, the 2 years with Chris Middleton and Drew Holiday, those guys are very good players, but most people don't consider them superstars, right? James Harden with Chris Paul. Chris Paul wasn't considered a superstar. 2017, Russ literally got the award because he wasn't playing with the superstar anymore. Steph with the 2015-2016 Warriors, with Klay Thompson or Draymond Green as the second best player. You really got to go back to KD in 2014 with Russ for the last time we saw a bona fide superstar win MVP playing alongside another player who's considered a superstar. That's almost 10 years ago. So I don't think Tatum, I don't think Giannis and Dame, I don't think AD or LeBron, I don't think Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and I don't think Kawhi Leonard or Paul George. I think those guys are basically disqualified. If you've won multiple MVPs recently, you're probably disqualified. We saw that with Giannis and Jokic. So, like, as much as Jokic is a candidate and he's the favorite right now, like, because he's won 2 of the last 3, like, we even literally saw this last year. It's like when Jokic was, like, clearly the MVP about a halfway, 2/3 of the way through the season, like, everybody was looking for other guys because that's just the human nature element. They don't want to give it to the same guy every year. So, like, Jokic is possible because he doesn't play alongside another true superstar, but it seems pretty unlikely that Jokic can win it. And then lastly, repeats do happen. Like, Jokic won 2 in a row, Giannis won 2 in a row, Steph won 2 in a row, LeBron won 2 in a row, LeBron won 2 in a row again, Steve Nash won 2 in a row. Like, you get the point. Like, in the last 20 years, like, more than half the MVPs have been repeat MVP winners. So that is definitely a possibility. So that means Joel Embiid is someone that could certainly win the award this year. So here are the top 5 candidates that I wrote down that I view as like good odds opportunities because of the writing off of the other guys based on those reasons that I just gave. Joel Embiid, really the only guy in the East I see that could win it. Like, again, Giannis or Dame, I think, are going to disqualify each other. Tatum's roster is going to disqualify them. Like, the Cavs guards, neither of them are real MVP candidates. Evan Mobley's too far away. Jalen Brunson, Julius Randle, those guys aren't MVP candidates. You look at guys that could in the future, guys like Paolo or Scotty Barnes, but they're both not even close to good enough yet, and their teams aren't even close to good enough yet. Like, Trae Young, I don't think is going to win an MVP. So, like, I don't think there's anybody else in the Eastern Conference who really could be a candidate unless Jason Tatum goes for like the craziest statistical season ever and the Celtics win like 65 games, which is on the table, but I think somewhat unlikely, right? There are several good candidates in the West. I did not put Luka Doncic on this list just because I don't think they'll win enough games. And again, we've seen a 6 seed do it, right, with Nikola Jokic last year. But that was a little different. Like, Jokic was considered by a lot of people to be the best player in the league at that time. The Nuggets, in terms of their win total, I think they won 48 games that year. Like, I don't think this Mavs team is winning 48 games. So, like, they were a 6 seed, but they were like a good 6 seed, right? I think this Mavs team is going to hover around 500 and be a play-in team, and I think that's going to keep Luka out of any chance of winning the MVP. So here are the 4 guys in the Western Conference that I put down. Steph Curry. Yeah, he's won back-to-back before, but he hasn't won one in 7 years, so there's no voter fatigue. And if anything, it's the opposite of that because he won a Finals MVP 2 years ago, and so there's probably more optimism surrounding him. He's a solo star. Like, this second-best player is probably an Andrew Wiggins, right, or maybe a Draymond or a Clay or a Chris Paul, depending on who you ask, but none of those guys are considered legitimate stars. And, like, if the Warriors finish with a better record than 2 of the Lakers, Sun, Nuggets trio, like if they finish with the 2 seed and Steph is putting up classic Steph numbers, like, Steph's going to win MVP. Like, that's on the table. And again, like I was mentioning earlier, they won 44 games with some really rough circumstances last year, so it's on the table. Second player I put down, Anthony Edwards. The Minnesota Timberwolves are going to have one of the top, 5-10 defenses in the league, in my opinion. Anthony Edwards himself contributes to that as an elite perimeter defender, at least when he's locked in. And then he went up a big level. I put him as number 15 in my player rankings this summer, right before FIBA. And everybody called me crazy. And then FIBA kind of ended up being a nice little vindication, so to speak, when Ant went in there and ended up being the best player on the team and playing really, really well. But like if he puts up crazy numbers and has a classic kind of like young up and coming season, and the Wolves defense kind of materializes and they win 50 games, I think he's got a chance to win the award. He's also kind of a fan favorite, and I think the voters could get behind him, especially as a guy who plays defense. Zion Williamson. The Pelicans were 8 points better per 100 possessions last year when Zion was on the floor versus when he was off, which was the best mark on the team among players who played at least 500 minutes. They really fell apart without him at the end of the year. And if you guys remember, for a brief moment there, they were actually the best team in the West. And so if they finish with the 1 seed, Zion's going to win MVP. And it's on the table because they were kind of playing at that pace before he got hurt, right? So I think he's a decent betting opportunity there. And then lastly, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Obviously, they were already super talented and about 500 last year, but all their younger guys are on the rise, getting a little better each season. Chet Holmgren, not only is he a really talented player you're adding to the mix, but he also fits a very specific need as like a true offensive threat at the 5 and a rim protecting fulcrum for your defense. And then, like, I don't think any of those guys are considered stars alongside Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. So, like, he kind of fits a lot of those categories that make him a very interesting candidate. And then the voters just love him. Like, he made first-team All-NBA last year despite missing the playoffs, and those are the same guys who vote for MVP. So I think he has a legitimate chance to win it this year. So I have, as my top 5 candidates, at least relative to value, Joel Embiid, Steph Curry, Anthony Edwards, Zion Williamson, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Again, I see these guys at the top, and it's like, it's not that I don't think Luka can win, but like, why would he be the second leading favorite when they're probably going to be a 500 team this year? Like, that just doesn't seem like a smart bet. Giannis at plus 550, like, he's playing with Dame. You don't think that's going to take away from the perceived value with the voters? Like, Jason Tatum's got the most talented roster of this decade. Like, he's probably not going to get it. Kevin Durant with Devin Booker, like you really think Trae Young's going to win MVP? So, like, I disagree with the Vegas odds on this one. And I think that group makes the most sense. So, best chance to win out of that group of 5, I'm going to go with Joel Embiid to repeat. The sympathy from the Harden situation, I think, is going to play a role. It's going to be kind of similar to Jokic last year, where it's like, without his guard, he's just going to get bonus points in MVP, right? Or I should say 2 years ago for Jokic. And I think the Sixers are still going to win a lot of games. I think they have good home court advantage. I think they're going to be still a very imposing regular season team, especially with the athleticism they added this summer. The best bet, though, in terms of odds, Steph at plus 1,500, I think, is a great bet. Because I think if the Warriors finish with a top 3 seed, he's got a really good chance to win it. Because he's going to be the one guy in that list who's not playing alongside other, like, perceived stars, right? I mean, even Jamal Murray with Jokic is probably a better player than, forget about probably, he is a better player than anybody else who plays on the Warriors, right? And then the other long shot odds that I like, DraftKings has Anthony Edwards at plus 3,000. That's a good bet. And they have Zion Williamson at plus 3,500. Those are really good long shot bets where you get some value. All right, question number 3. Which team is going to surprise us most? I put 4 teams down. First is the Thunder. I've talked about them to death, so I won't stay too long, but Chet obviously fills a very specific need. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is a top-tier superstar capable type of player that can lead a team in late-game situations and kind of push them over the top. All their young players like Giddey and Jalen Williams are going to go up a level. They've got lots of shooting. Everything makes a ton of sense. Mark Daigneault, I think, is a great coach. I think that the Thunder are going to be a team that goes up a level in a big way this year. The Orlando Magic, they've got this mix of like truly imposing size mixed with a ton of ball handling. Their shooting is a little bit come and go, but like they've got a ton of ball handling, which I think is really valuable. A lot of young players on the rise. And they had a lot of impressive wins last year. They beat the Celtics a couple of times. They had a couple of winning streaks. This is a team that like masqueraded as a really good team for brief stretches last year. And so it just seems natural that they would just do that for longer stretches this year, right? I see the Magic being right around 500 this year, which I think would be like a 7 or 8 game improvement from where they were last year. Third, the Timberwolves. Talked about this a lot. The combination of perimeter defense and rim protection. There's a specific lineup I'm dying to see, which is Anthony Edwards with Nickeil Alexander-Walker alongside Jaden McDaniels and Kyle Anderson and Rudy Gobert. I think they're going to smother teams defensively. I think there's a trade to make if they decide to move on from either Gobert or Cat to kind of like make their roster make a little bit more sense. And then I think Anthony Edwards is poised to have a top 5 MVP finish. So I think that puts the Wolves much higher in the standings. And then lastly, the Atlanta Hawks. Continuity between DeJounte Murray and Trae Young, just having more time to play together. A full training camp with Quinn Snyder so he can input his offensive and defensive principles. And then lastly, the ability to reorient their lineup without John Collins to go with another wing, someone like Sadiq Bey. That just gives you a better chance of having more traditional 4-out, 1-in spacing for their pick and rolls, which I think is going to make their offense better, which was already a top 10 offense last year, despite being one of the worst spot-up shooting teams in the league. All right, question number 4. Which team is going to be the biggest disappointment? I put 2 teams down here, and one of them doesn't really count. The big one for me is the Kings. I think I've talked about this before on the show. They have the best injury luck of any team last year. So that just by virtue of the law of averages, they'll probably miss guys for more games this year. And then urgency. They really attacked last year's regular season, and then they found out pretty quickly you get to the postseason, it's a different battle, right? And so I think this team's going to kind of view the big picture a little bit more and have less urgency on a day-to-day basis in the regular season. So I think they'll go down into the play-in tournament. And then the Milwaukee Bucks. To be clear, this is not a postseason prediction. This is a regular season prediction. I think their postseason ceiling is higher than it has been really ever in the Giannis era. So to be clear, I that's not what this is about. I just think they're going to struggle in the regular season. Dame seems to be a little bit out of shape. He's been leaving all of his jump shots short in preseason. They aren't very good defensively on the perimeter, which is something that is valuable in the regular season, and they aren't very deep. And so I think they're going to go down a level. Wouldn't be surprised if they finished in that like 3 or 4 seed, but certainly at least 5-6 games below the Boston Celtics in the standings, whereas they've been a higher seed in the past. All right, last question before we get to the mailbag. Who are going to be the most fun teams to watch on League Pass? I put, 8 teams down. First, the Indiana Pacers. So we're starting the Eastern Conference. They have a ton of speed. You got Tyrese Haliburton is one of the funnest players to watch in the league. Gets the ball moving around quickly. There's just a flow and like a pop to his offense when he's leading the team. Bruce Brown just kind of adds another dynamic slashing guard to a group that already has a ton of dynamic slashing guards. And you put those two next to Ben Mathurin, they're just going to be a huge pain in the ass in the regular season because they're going to be so damn fast. They're going to drive and kick you to death. All those guys can shoot. They have a great home crowd. I wouldn't be surprised if they were well over 500 at home, which is just enough to kind of float a 500 record, even if you're a limited team on the road. So the Pacers are going to be fun. Washington Wizards, I was watching Jordan Poole's 41-point outburst the other day. He's actually one of the more fun players to watch in the league because he just has such a beautiful scoring flair. And then Kyle Kuzma is a guy who's got a lot of scoring pop. So like they're going to be bad, but they're going to be really fun to watch, and they're going to be a highlight factor. And it's going to be one of those teams when you turn them on League Pass, you're going to have a good time watching them even if they don't win, right? The Magic. Anytime you get to watch Paolo Banchero and Markelle Fultz, two of my favorite, kind of Paolo is like this modern post-up perimeter big. And then Markelle Fultz, who's kind of like coming into his own as this real like downhill power guard with a lot of command of his game that you didn't see in previous years. So he's been a lot of fun. Oklahoma City Thunder, we've already talked about them to death, but they're fun. The Pelicans, Zion's really fun to watch. And then that home crowd is great, and they have a ton of shooting. And some fun role players, guys like Trey Murphy, guys like Jose Alvarado. The San Antonio Spurs, anytime you're going to watch one of the great draft prospects of all time and Victor Wembanyama, they're going to be fun. Houston Rockets, I just think they're going to be fun because of a couple of specific things. One, they're just going to have grown-ups in the room, so they'll be a more organized basketball team. Dylan Brooks and Jabari Smith Jr. are going to put a lot of perimeter players in jail with what they can do defensively. Jabari Smith Jr., too, is one of my favorite up-and-coming young players in the league. He's taken a huge leap over the summer as a ball handler and as a shooter. I just think they're going to be a fun team to watch. And then the Portland Trailblazers, with all the athleticism, with Scoot Henderson, with Shaedon Sharpe, with Anthony Simons, even with DeAndre Ayton in the picture, Jeremy Grant, like they're going to be a fun team to watch with a great home crowd. They're going to be more engaged than they have been in recent years just because of all the excitement surrounding the young players. Those are going to be the fun League Pass teams to watch. And again, those are deliberately teams that are not going to be on national television all that much. All right, moving on to the mailbag. First mailbag question. I had a lot of questions kind of along this line of thought, but I wanted to answer it in detail here. So the software you use to watch tape and break down specific data play types, is it something that you could implement into your show/presentation? Sort of like an illustrator like the one Dan Orlovsky uses with ESPN. It would help for a lot of people like myself who are visually oriented and need a visual example of what you were describing, especially given that you're such a fast talker. I'm sorry. And are very terminology heavy. Thanks in advance. Once again, congrats on the new channel and great content. Thanks for the kind words. I am sorry that I talk so fast. I will try to work on that a little bit. Here's the thing. We've tried the video thing. There's a risk reward factor and a work factor that makes it so that we can't do it. So first of all, we're technically not allowed to use NBA footage. Now, you can do it, and technically, like like you have to get 3 strikes, and like they don't check every single video, right? Like there's some like leeway to use it a little bit and not have issues, but it's a couple of different things. One, it takes a lot of work. like behind the scenes to actually put video content that's edited and annotated into the show takes a lot of work, but it has a big risk involved because if you get too many strikes, you actually literally lose the ability to monetize on YouTube. It can be a big problem, right? And so when we looked at the amount of work that it took to do while also looking at the risk involved, we just decided it wasn't worth it. And I understand that makes it more challenging. And, who knows, maybe at some point in the future, those dynamics will change and we'll be able to do it. And I hope at some point in my career, I'll be able to take advantage of those types of tools. But trust me, it's not for lack of trying. Those of you guys who've been around the last couple of years, you've seen us try. We've tried to do video content. It's very labor intensive and has a lot of risk on the back end to cause problems. And so we've just kind of opted to go a different route. But again, I'm going to be doing a lot more tape breakdowns on the social media sites because I can get away with it there because we're not monetizing. So like Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, those are going to be the places you're going to want to follow me for video content. I'm going to try to get 3 or 4 video breakdowns out a week on there. And then so one of you other guys put a comment in about a whiteboard. That's an interesting idea. I don't know that it would work with the flow of the show, but it's worth a try. And so maybe I'll just go online and buy a coaching clipboard with the whiteboard with a little basketball, a 3-point arc and key on there. And then we can at least try it and see how it goes. And if it ends up being clunky, we'll ditch it. And I'm not opposed to trying new things. But yeah, obviously we just have some limitations. This is not ESPN. We don't have a production staff of 20 people here. Everyone's remote. I've got a small staff that works on the show, and those guys already have a ton of work to do in general. And so it just kind of got to the point where it was unrealistic to do at this point. And if we ever got to the point where we had the ability to use the footage, then maybe we can invest on that front and not have to worry about the risk, but we're just not there right now. What are your thoughts on the importance of the ball you use when you train? When I practice by myself, I feel really comfortable and fluid with my basketball. Then we play a game with a different basketball, and all of a sudden my handle feels funky and my jump shot is off. How do you train in order to avoid this? So I thought this was actually a really, really interesting question. I, like most basketball players that are not playing in any sort of professional capacity, just use a Wilson Evolution. I think it is just the best, most affordable indoor basketball that you can use. And so I practice with that ball every single day. And I do all my shooting drills with it, and I do all my ball handling drills with it, and even my high school team that I coach uses that ball. And so that's just all I use. And then I know the feeling because I had a bunch of college players come in town to work out with me this summer. It's basically what I do every summer is just work out with usually about anywhere between 3 to half dozen college players that come back in town. And we just work out. And this summer we were working out at the Richard Jefferson Center at the U of A, at the University of Arizona, and they have the Wilson Evo there, which those of you guys who have used the Wilson Evo, it's very different from the Evolution. It's not like a smooth leather cover. It's like that really pebbled, almost like spongy cover. And like a lot of shooters, I use a little bit of my opposite thumb, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Steph Curry uses his opposite thumb. I've always said this to shooters, it really doesn't matter what your form is as long as you can replicate it. And to me, it's more important for you to ditch unnecessary movement in your lower body. So you want to have really good energy transfer through your gather to the release, right? And so I noticed when I worked out with the guys this summer, I handled the ball a lot better because it's easier to dribble that kind of spongy basketball, but I was having trouble shooting with it because it was messing with my opposite thumb, right? Now, here's the thing. That doesn't really matter to me because I'm not trying to play at any sort of high level, right? I'm in my mid-30s and I'm just doing it for fun, right? But if you're a young player and you're looking to play in college at some level or even in high school, you should find out what your game ball is going to be. If it's going to be an Evolution, get an Evolution. If it's going to be an Evo, get an Evo. I saw the NCAA or NJCAA teams, the junior colleges are using this Rawlings basketball that's literally it's literally the worst basketball I've ever played with. I used it in a scrimmage against a prep school team a few weeks ago. and like literally the worst basketball I've ever used. But like if that's the ball you're going to use during the season, go buy one. Because you need to practice with the ball that you're going to use in the games, because they are all a little bit different. They all have a little bit of a different feel to them. And if you're gonna get into a rhythm with that basketball, it will help you when you get into game situations. So again, just do the research, find out what kind of ball your program or team is going to use, buy that ball so you get used to it. And then just understand that, yeah, when you play a random pickup game with a different ball, you're going to have some issues, but it's not anything to overly think about. Last mailbag question. What's the name of your Star Wars podcast? I mentioned this yesterday, and I had several people ask about it in the comments. So it's called Two Sons Podcast. You can see the little thing back here. It's TWOSUNS. But we don't just cover Star Wars. We cover basically everything in terms of film and TV. But I personally have a passion for like sci-fi and fantasy and stuff like that. So we do a lot of Game of Thrones. We do Lord of the Rings. We do alien invasion movies and Star Wars and all that kind of stuff. But we are currently we just finished the Ahsoka series, and we're doing the Bane book series, the Darth Bane book series right now. We just did a breakdown of the first book like a few days ago that you guys can find on that feed. And then we're going to, here in the next week, start a rewatch of Game of Thrones, because my buddy Luke has never actually seen Game of Thrones. And one of you guys had a really good idea in the comments. You were like, hey, why don't you read the book while Luke watches the show, and then you guys can kind of react together. And so I think that's what we're going to do. So we're going to do a breakdown of Game of Thrones, and then obviously as any major movie release comes out, we're going to hit that. As every major culturally resonant, TV show comes out, like season 2 of Last of Us will cover, like that kind of stuff. Like when major television and movie releases we cover that as well. But Luke is my best friend in the world, and him and I just have fun hanging out, and it's very different vibe from this show. It's more just hanging out, but I bring some of that same kind of like analysis vibe that you pick up from this show, because I get really deep into the lore. So like I read the books and I read up all of the information and the backstories, and I find like intricate plot connections to be super interesting. It's always been something that I've been drawn to. So I encourage you guys to go check it out. I think it'd be a fun listen for you guys. All right, guys, that is all I have for today. As always, I sincerely appreciate you supporting the show. We're going to take the rest of this weekend off and Monday off, and then we will be back on Tuesday night covering NBA regular season basketball. I'm so excited. Again, thank you guys so much for supporting the show and subscribing to the new channel. It means the world to me. I think we're going to accomplish big things this year, and I'm excited to see what those are.